What's up, guys? Nick Schiffer here with another episode of Site Visit. We're down in East Providence, Rhode Island today. I got Brian, Site Super, on the job site. I know you guys like the interview style more rather than just me talking to the camera straight. So Brian, you're joining us today. A little bit different on the inside of this home. We have a plywood wall up, but it's also a few feet in from the edge. Can you walk through why we have this here?
We're trying to keep things moving with the trades. We want to make sure that HVAC can start at a certain time, just so we can keep people moving through. And one of the challenges that we have is this sliding door is really large, the one that's beyond this plywood.
Right.
And we can't install that stuff until we have our custom flashings made. Basically, there's a whole process that has to happen before those flashings go in. We have to make sure all our windows are measured correctly. Mm-hmm. We have the custom flashings done, but then powder coated. Right. By the finisher.
There's a lot of steps there, and last week we talked about that. Mark Jordan was on site doing the mock-ups. We got those mock-ups done, but we actually found out 2 of the windows are incorrectly sized.
Yeah.
So that pushes a pause on fabricating those flashing details, or those pieces of flashing, because it's actually the 2 corner windows need to be modified slightly.
Yep.
Once those are modified, he can come back out, template those, and fabricate those. But then they're going to a powder coater. So one question I want to address, a lot of you guys have asked on the video as well as Instagram, is what about using aluminum and having the thermal bridging issue? I'm not sure if you saw that, Brian, but the thermal bridging isn't actually an issue. Number one, the windows are aluminum, but that flashing only goes in so far underneath the window, and there is a thermal break in that window system, and that flashing does not go beyond. So it's not like that aluminum is going to conduct the cold all the way back to the heated inside. It's broken right underneath the window. So with that being said, the biggest reason that this wall is here is because we want our trades to get going. And one of our first trades is HVAC, is that right?
HVAC to do the rough duct work and the equipment install too. We're talking about the air handling units that are going to be in the basement.
Right, so it's really important that we're dry.
Yeah.
And we have the wet guard siga product up on the roof to keep the roof dry.
Right.
But this is a huge opening that we had to figure out at least how to protect, wind and rain or even snow coming in.
Yeah, I mean, these window details are so intricate that it got into the critical path, and we just needed to find a way to get it out of the critical path so that we can keep some things moving through.
Right.
Also, not to stall the framers. The framers are moving out to work on the deck. The fact that we got this temporary wall up, they can, they're a little bit more flexible on how they can work. They can go out there, come back in here, help out the HVAC guys if they need it.
Yep.
If
you actually walk around here, you can see, if you tuck around, you can actually see the overhang. If you want to whip around here, Doug, you can actually see how far that temporary wall is set back. And it allows not only the door to be installed with this temporary wall, but also all the flashing to be installed. And one of the key things is, Brian, you actually had them frame this soffit above, right? And that is for the future HVAC ductwork as well as shade pockets and things like that.
Yeah, we had to put a lot of thought into where this temporary wall was going to go, because if it was too far to the outside, they wouldn't have room to work. It also could interfere with their ability to set up those, the trunk line, and then where the diffusers were going, and the shades and all that stuff. So this gives them about a 3-foot space that they can work in beyond the wall if they want to.
But that's really the important part, is like constant coordination, and you're working with all of the trades, the HVAC guy, the framer, as well as the architect, to make sure that these temporary walls, we're not just throwing up a temporary wall wherever. It's really thoughtful in this consideration. Not only will this help the door guys get the doors installed, but it helps the framers do what they need to do. It helps the HVAC team do what they need to do. And it can stay there for a long time until that actual final condition is installed.
Absolutely.
So flipping around here, I posted on our Instagram feed this elevation of the future kitchen. We've strapped this. We're at a point where we're almost ready for Ken from Materia to come out and do our site condition dimensions so they can go into shop drawings. There's a couple things that are preventing us from measuring at this point. What are those?
One of them is that once this window is installed, we'll be able to establish the height of the countertop. So even though we could make a a guess as far as shimming the bottom of the window and bringing it up to where it's really better if the window's in place, because then we know exactly where it's going to be and there's no mismatch in those two planes.
And the reason being is that that window actually is right at countertop height.
Yeah.
So we have this in-swing casement right here that actually is going to swing across the basically the top of that countertop. So that
Right, you need some clearance.
and it's really tight clearance at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other part was that the second thing was that they're going to bring down this strapping about a half an inch. Part of that is because the height of the window is a little lower than maybe they expected, and so just to get things so that there's not sort of an odd amount of spacing above the window as opposed to below. The ceiling's going to come down, and then it's also going to align with the bottom of the soffits, for the HVAC.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is on the same plane.
And Brian, that's something that we were talking about right before and off camera, is like a lot of these details where it's like you could have just left that a half inch higher and the majority people would almost never notice.
Right.
But it's these details that are really thoughtful and intentional that allow the space to look and frankly feel better.
Right.
And another one over here is, we talked about this in a previous episode, is this converging point of three basically inside corner, the angled ceiling, and then the pitched ceiling going up to the skylight. But after watching that video, I think you and Julia actually had another conversation and said, wait a second, there's something else that we need to take into account. And what was that?
I mean, it all kind of revolves around her intent, which I believe is how light coming into the space goes across the surface. And I think the rough opening for that window needs to have kind of a nice surface.
If I may, I'm going to take a pointer.
Yeah.
So this, that double rafter up there, up in the skylight, is about 6 inches off of here. Correct me if I'm wrong, right, Brian?
Yeah.
So we're going to actually bring this wall out another 6 inches, so you have one continuous plane from this wall all the way up to the glass.
Yeah, you won't get any harsh shadows when the light's crossing, from east to west. Mm-hmm. The light will just kind of have a nice effect on that wall right there.
And then what's going on over here with your Sharpie markers?
We're just confirming that.
I feel like a teacher.
We're confirming that the top of this ceiling is going to be that line is going to carry all the way across. So some of that framing up there is temporary, and it's there so that the HVAC ductwork doesn't go outside of bounds.
Right.
And that line is where they're going to have to modify the top of that framing to get that line that goes, continuous from left to right.
Right.
So the opening to the top of that.
So right now that is basically bottom of plaster, and then this framing over here will be modified or cut. So then that's your point where it goes from vertical to angled.
Exactly.
And that line will continue all the way across and then run across the top of the stair, and that way you have that continuous line again.
Yeah.
Cool. I know you guys are prepping for the back deck. Why don't we go out there?
Sure.
The main deck brackets are installed. I want to talk about those. But before we do, we have another product that we're using here for our door sills instead of just our Wigluv tape that we were using in our windowsills. Why is that? And what is this?
Well, our rep at Siga basically told us that they don't have a product that's rated to be used as a door pan. Mm-hmm. They told us that we should go out and see if we can find something that would be compatible with whatever they're using.
Sure.
So that's where we leaned towards Proseco on that.
So we actually had the rep, come out and walk through this with us, right?
Yeah, he was very generous with his time, and he even hooked us up with a couple of samples. Showed us some pictures of some things that they had done that were similar. Mm-hmm. And our architect, Julia, came out here just last week during some of the good weather. Did an amazing job at this, turned it up the sides enough, so that we don't have to worry about any water migrating into the frame.
So she did this and out near the deck as well, right?
Yep.
So let's make our way over there. A couple people have asked, you and I were just chatting about this. I know you laugh about it, but let's talk about what we got going on with this scrap bin. We don't have a dumpster on the job site. And I had made the comment before that we're going to do without a dumpster, and Ken was so polite to remind me that except for the dumpster that's at the shop that we're sneaking trash into every once in a while. But no one needs to know about that. Scrap wood. What was the original intent here?
Well, I mean, this has been sort of an obsession for me. It's sort of something I care a lot about. You know, on the last project, I just saw a lot of waste. Job site waste is something that a lot of lead projects try to target. You know, they talk about waste diversion streams and some of the challenges around that to be able to to figure out how much of your trash is going to be lumber or wood. Wood waste, how much is going to be plaster or gypsum. Mm-hmm. And this is just an attempt, at least a first attempt, to get a handle on some of that and first of all, reduce the amount of waste that leaves the site, makes it so that things can be reused. This bin started out as sort of an idea where we, somebody needed to do blocking. They would see, okay, these are all the pieces that are large enough to do blocking. You can grab from it and do that.
Right.
I've sort of learned by watching, the workflow of the framers. Sometimes it's a lot more convenient to just grab an 8-footer and cut it. And so knowing that the vicinity to where they're working, that the lumber needs to be easily reachable, but also they can't just sit there and say, is that the right size? We're kind of thinking about version 2.0, where there could be a series of different size bins, different height bins. Maybe they're 2 by 2, and they've got some measurement hash marks on the sides, so that you could look at that bin and say, yes, I need a piece of 18-inch blocking, and grab it, and it's going to be the right size.
Right, because one of the things, commonly is you're reaching for the closest piece of material and you're cutting it to the length you need.
Yeah.
And if you're over here looking for a 24-inch piece and you pull out 3 at 23 inches, you're just getting frustrated.
You're wasting your time. Yeah.
Wasting your time, where it's like if you can quickly know how long something is or how big something is, you're more apt to use that.
Yeah, it's definitely it's a challenge, and I think some of these ideas, they just need to be kind of tested in the field to see how well they work.
Sure.
I'm always open to feedback from other people who have done either lead projects or who've sort of mastered this problem. But,
right. And even beyond that, you have recycling, you have a metal one, you have bottles and cans, you also have cardboard, paper, trash, and things like that. So it's nice that you're taking the approach, and one of the questions that you mentioned earlier is understanding not only where this stuff goes, but how much you're generating per kind of item, and realizing that the next time we do a project, it's like, all right, scrap wood, we have a lot of it, and in order to correctly organize it, we need a better method of it.
Yeah.
Where it's like maybe bottles and cans, we don't have that many, and we can do away with something like that.
I found one of the big items, I made the signs and laminated them. The recycling for cardboard. Cardboard is huge, and especially as HVAC comes through, there's a lot of cardboard. There's a lot of scrap metal cut-offs from doing the tin knocking, I guess you would say. And there are means to take those things. Even I get rid of the cardboard for free.
Right.
But I think there would be some value in some of the larger projects to get some reporting on how much cardboard went off site, how much wood waste, and just to be able to have that feeling of accomplishment around it.
Totally. Let's walk out back. So just a quick reminder, guys, we have this deck that wraps pretty much around the entire back 3 sides of this house, and is supported by these galvanized columns. In the final detail, we're actually going to be burying that plate, and the grass will go right up against it. But up top, you get these saddles, which will support our pressure-treated framing. But on the house, we have exterior insulation, and we can't just install a ledger up against our sheathing because it would be really hard to detail, that exterior insulation around it. So what we ended up doing, Brian, I'm going to turn it to you, kind of what our detail is up there, and let's just walk through kind of what we have.
We ended up being able to build all these blocks that hold the main deck brackets off the house without having to cut into an 8-foot, 10-foot LVL.
Right. That's all LVL scrap.
It's all LVL scrap. So that was really good. One of the intentions of this was to create a thermal break, I guess. The idea is to hold the brackets off the wall so you can get as much insulation as you can.
Right.
without any bridging, or with limited amount of bridging.
So we actually have 2 layers of 6-inch insulation on here. One will actually wrap kind of around that LVL.
Yeah.
And that second layer will actually wrap really tight around that webbing of that main deck bracket. And just
it's going to bury the bracket basically.
And for anyone that's listening, it's MAINE, like the state deck bracket. And we're not saying the main as in like these are the main brackets.
Yeah.
These are main deck brackets. So you do get that really continuous insulation, and you're also building that ledger off. Now, one of the questions that came up a lot is like, well, why not just fabricate custom brackets? It's a fair point, and you know, at the end of the day, we did a quick study. It would have been more expensive to fabricate custom brackets than using some of the scrap. Julia was kind enough to come out here and do the Proseco detailing.
Yep.
So all in all, it may be a few dollars, but a few dollars saved is dollars saved on a project like this.
Yeah, she also took those LVL blocks home and drilled all the holes, pre-drilled them all on her drill press. So
because those are actually through bolted.
Yeah.
They're not just anchor lag, but they're through bolted.
Through bolted with washers and everything.
And those LVL blocks are actually bolted to the LVL that's beyond inside that is actually designed there to support above the window.
Right. And they removed some of the plywood sheathing around the blocks to get more of a positive connection.
That was a detail that Hazel Neal had put together for us to make sure that, because we also wanted to make sure that the brackets could in fact be blocked off of what that structure is, rather than, typically you would have them right against the sheathing, but here we had that blocking. And
yeah, that's precisely where a structural engineer comes in. I mean, you remember this from school. We studied, statics, right, where they talk about the moments and the connection and how there's actually a turning force happening there, right, pulling away and pushing in towards the wall.
Right.
And so they need to make sure that that's fully supported and it's not going to rip off the wall when it has its full, load up. Say she's having a party. There's a lot of people standing on that deck.
I hope we're at the party.
Yeah, definitely. And that all those things have to be considered.
Right.
And that's what we ended up with.
Yeah, so shout out to Ben over at Hazel Neal. Those guys have been great. That's one of the things I like working with them is they're always willing to be creative and making sure that we're coming up with the best solution. And yes, we'd spent, a handful of hours kind of figuring out how to detail this, but at the end, we ended up with something that was an off-the-shelf product, not overly customizable, and ended up with what we needed for the structure. And you're getting your continuous insulation around that entire bracket prior to us getting our deck up and installed.
Yeah, we end up with a very limited amount of thermal bridging.
Guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Site Visit. Brian, thank you for being on this episode in Rhode Island. We're going to have him on more of these episodes down here. Stay tuned. We'll see you guys in our Needham project here in a few days.